Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I know that you've reached masterful levels of it. Obviously, there's always room for improvement. But how long have you been training BJJ?
I started putting on the gi, man, in like 2000, what was it, 2004, I think is when I first put on the gi, and I got my black belt in 4.5 years, in 2008, before I fought George St. Pierre. So I've been a black belt for a while. But you know, I never got to compete on the world stage as a black belt because I was fighting. That was my forte is the fighting. But you know, I have high levels. I've competed against guys at high levels in jiu-jitsu. But I do jiu-jitsu as a hobby, but mostly to learn better techniques to fight.
Right.
I'm not necessarily straightforward jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of straightforward. If I put the gi on, went up against a lot of other jiu-jitsu Muay champions, I'd probably struggle. But that's, you know, I'd rather punch you in the face than pull your arm. Yeah.
Well, I mean, which was the first combative form that you started training? Is it wrestling, boxing, wrestling?
I started with wrestling. So a lot of people don't consider wrestling a martial art, but it completely is.
Totally is.
Yeah, it is. It's combat, and I think it's the best base for fighting, MMA fighting in general. Even self-defense, I think. You control where the fight goes if you're able to wrestle at a high level.
How old were you when you started?
I was in the 4th grade.
4th grade.
When I first started, and I remember I was a big pro wrestling fan, you know, and then I went to my first wrestling practice, and I was like, they lied to me. they were lying to me.
Yeah.
And I was like the first, like, real emotional, like, let down, I think, in my life that I can remember. The first traumatic experience in my life was learning that pro wrestling was fake.
Yeah.
You know, I threw my stuff away. I threw my posters away. I was so upset. And I was like, these guys lied to me. To this day, I'm still a little bitter about it.
I dig. Well, where'd you go from there?
From there, you know, I wrestled high school. Had pretty good success in high school. I was a 2-time state placer. And then I walked on to Purdue wrestling team. And that was 1997 was my freshman year there.
And what brought you into MMA?
I got into MMA because my college assistant coach, Tom Erickson, was an MMA fighter. He fought in Brazil sometimes, and then he had a few times, and then he fought for Pride at the time. And Pride was, you know, like the biggest organization at that time.
Did you always want to be a fighter, or?
I mean, it didn't even exist before. When I grew up, I've always wanted to play football. I thought I was going to be a professional football player. I started playing PAL football in the 4th grade, you know. So wrestling was kind of like something I really liked, but I did it to stay in shape and to get tougher for football. And it wasn't until senior football season, it was halfway through, and I was like, I hadn't gotten any calls from any colleges for any scholarships. You know, there were some small schools that wanted me to wrestle and play football, but like, I wanted to do it at the highest level. I wanted to compete whatever I could at the highest level, so I decided to focus on wrestling and then walk on to the Purdue wrestling team.
In terms of, you know, fighting and everything, when did you really know, like, okay, this is something that's got me hooked? Like, was it your first fight? Was it, you know, did it come before that? Yeah,
you know, as I first started training, I just fell in love with the techniques and constantly getting better. And it was actually like my first fight I lost. And I remember thinking like, man, like I can't go out like that. I can't, you know, I can't let that be the only fight. So then it pushed me to keep fighting and keep trying. You know, when I first started fighting, it was kind of like I wanted to make money, I wanted to travel, wanted to get girls. But then when I made that, the first year I moved to California and I started training, I started realizing it was more about being a martial artist and be following the martial way and just being a better person and making myself a better person, you know, every day. I wanted to wake up every morning and knowing that I was better than the day before. Not just at fighting, but just at life. I wanted to be a better person every day. And then when I got introduced to Jiu-Jitsu too, it just grew even more from then, and more of a love for the martial arts mentality. You know, I consider myself a martial artist, not a fighter. Fighting is just what I do to make my money. But I really took hold to being a martial artist, and it changed my perspective about a lot of things in life.
Well, I mean, do you get nervous before your fights?
You know, everybody gets nervous. to a level.
Right.
But you know, when it's fight time, it's fun time. I'm more nervous about cutting weight and making weight on Friday.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, that's the fight before the fight.
Yeah, it is
like,
definitely
the fight
the fight.
actually is fun. You know, that's the cool part.
Mm-hmm.
You get to walk out in front of a bunch of people. People yell your name. You get to do some fist bumps. You know,
Right.
that's the cool part.